Welcome to Good Screenwriting. I'm Trevor Meyer, and today we're going to talk about Star Wars Episode 8, The Last Jedi. All right, so if you've been paying attention to the reviews at all, you know that the reaction has been mixed, particularly among fans. The critics actually like this a lot. Based on the Rotten Tomatoes score, the critics actually find this to be the fourth best Star Wars movie ever made. Empire Strikes Back, A New Hope, The Force Awakens, and The Last Jedi. The audience, however, thinks that this is the worst live-action Star Wars movie ever made by a wide margin, okay? I think Phantom Menace is at 59%, Attack of the Clones is at 58%, and The Last Jedi currently stands at 52%, which, wow, really. And honestly, on the way out of the theater, I was saying that it was a bit of an overreaction, I think, on the part of the fans, on the part of the audience members who reviewed this movie. I don't think it's as bad as people are saying. In fact, and I don't think it's as good as the critics are saying either. I think it's somewhere in the middle. If you know anything about the things that I teach, about the review pyramid and all, it's going to make a lot of money. It's already made its money back in its first week. More than, all right? It's gone beyond breaking even within its first week. So that's not going to be a problem. And it got the critics' reviews, which is great. Certified fresh. And it's really highly rated. It's like 92% or something like that with the critics right now. So that's not the problem either. This is a category of film that I put in a box called the Mystery Box, actually, which I actually think I stole from J.J. Abrams. But the Mystery Box is a category where I don't really understand why it is the way it is, okay? Which is that the critics like it, and the everyday, ordinary people are at least liking it enough to go pay money to see it over and over again, all right? You don't get this kind of result from one-time viewers, okay? People are going back to see it 2, 3, 4 times already. I know friends who have done that already, okay? And I wouldn't mind seeing it again, honestly. So what's interesting, though, is that the people in the middle, okay? You got the critics up top, you got the everyday people on the bottom of the big pyramid, picture it like the old food pyramid, and somewhere in the middle, you have the extremely vocal online critics who are not professional critics. They don't get paid to do it. They're just very opinionated people who saw the movie, okay? And the interesting thing about the Rotten Tomatoes system is that they rate 52% as rotten because it's not good enough, okay? It's more like a grading system at school. If you don't get above 60%, it's not good enough. But in reality, if you look at the number like 52%, that actually means that most people like the movie. But it's about 50-50, all right? Half the people love the movie and the other half hate it, okay? It's getting very extreme reactions from both sides. And for the beginning part of this review, I'm going to try to avoid spoilers, okay? So it's really hard to do, though, because they've been so mysterious about their marketing and the plot and the characters of this movie. It's going to be really hard to talk about it without spoiling it. So, in the vaguest terms possible to start this review off, I'm going to say that I, walking out of the theater, would almost give it a 5 out of 5. Almost give it a 5 out of 5. And because I was feeling really good about it on the way out. And I was like, you know what? I think people are overreacting. I thought that was great. And then I started thinking about some stuff. I'm like, all right, it's not a 5. It's like a 4 out of 5. And then I started thinking about it some more. And I'm like, there's a lot of this movie that actually doesn't make any sense if you actually think about it. So now I have to bump it down to a 3 out of 5, unfortunately. So that's the real bummer about this movie, is that if you're familiar with the phrase fridge logic, what that means is the movie works completely fine while you're watching it. And then later that night, you go to the fridge and you're getting yourself a snack and you think to yourself, hey, wait a second. And you start asking questions about things that actually don't make any sense in the movie. And that happens a lot with this movie. In fact, I can tell you again, this is not a spoiler. I'm being very vague here, but one line of dialogue would have done away with at least half of the movie, if not 2/3 of the movie. Okay, and there's at least 1/3 of the movie currently as is that you could lift out of the entire plot and not lose a single beat. Okay, so that's an issue. And I will say, by far, the biggest criticism of the movie, given even by Mark Hamill himself, is that people don't like this version of Luke Skywalker. They say that this version of Luke Skywalker ruined the character for everybody. And I'm willing to bet, because I read a lot of the negative reviews, but I'm willing to bet that the positive reviews actually say the opposite, that it's one of the best performances by Mark Hamill. In fact, a lot of the critics said that too. So I'm in the camp that said that this was actually a really good move for Luke Skywalker, and I totally understood why they did it, okay? So the fact that it made a lot of fans angry is upsetting, and it should be taken into account if you're out there and you're actually in an opportunity where you can write a character that's part of a big franchise that people really care about. This is a lesson for people going forward to be very careful about these iconic characters, okay? So I think previously I had talked about writing a spec script for Terminator 6, not to actually sell it or get it produced or anything, because James Cameron is already producing and co-writing a Terminator 6, sort of. It's not a sequel to Terminator Genesis. I would be doing a sequel to Terminator Genesis as just like a writing sample to show what I would do if I were continuing the franchise. Stick it in my portfolio, save it for later. But, how I would treat the Arnold Schwarzenegger character, the iconic Terminator character, would be influenced to a great degree by how people reacted to how they treat Luke Skywalker in this movie, okay? So you got to be careful whose toys you're playing with, okay? Because people take this stuff very seriously. So I don't know if there's much else I can say without giving anything away, but basically, people are mad about Luke. I'm not. I'm mad that most of the movie is completely irrelevant and could have been cut out very easily, and just seems like it was there just to be there to give the other characters something to do, okay? That being said, there's not much else I can tell you, all right? So I give it a 3 out of 5. I think you should see it. I think if you like Star Wars, if you're curious about this movie, go for it. Go watch it and decide for yourself. That being said, we're about to go into spoiler territory, okay? In 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So, this movie has made it its mission to systematically destroy everything set up in The Force Awakens, which is actually okay in my book. And I really like The Force Awakens, but I kind of respect Rian Johnson's approach, which is to react to The Force Awakens, okay? He didn't see the movie when he was writing the script because the movie hadn't even been made yet. He was reacting to the script that he read for The Force Awakens and used that as his inspiration for The Last Jedi. So I think that one of the biggest criticisms of The Force Awakens is that it's too similar to A New Hope. By far, the biggest criticism of The Last Jedi is that it deviates too far from either A New Hope or The Empire Strikes Back or whatever people thought this movie was going to be. It goes way off the rails, okay? On a lot of the surface details. Structurally, it's not that different from what I was expecting. Like, look, I was expecting something huge, okay? I was expecting something like the Jedi Order has been corrupt from the very beginning. It was seeded with Hydra agents at the very inception of the Jedi Order and it has to be torn down because they were actually corrupt jerks. They didn't do that. Luke Skywalker did not become a Jedi, or did not become a Sith or anything like that. He didn't turn to the dark side. None of the major characters die, as in Rey survives, Poe survives, Finn survives, Kylo Ren survives. There are a couple of deaths in the movie, but not at all surprising. Okay, I've warned you. Okay, this is spoilers. Okay, so this is your last chance to stop. But yeah, Luke does die in this movie. Okay. Now we've established though through Obi-Wan Kenobi and Yoda that if a Jedi dies, that's not necessarily a deal breaker for him coming back in the next movie. In fact, I think Mark Hamill and Ryan Johnson were both looking forward to him coming back in Episode 9 as a ghost, which would be kind of cool. So I would say that, and we get a nice moment with another Force ghost in this movie. It's Yoda. Yoda comes back, which is awesome. And not only do they bring back Yoda, I thought they were going to do like the CGI version from Episode 3. No, no, it's the puppet. They brought back the puppet from Empire Strikes Back. It was so great. And he's voiced by Frank Oz. And it's like a reunion of these two characters who haven't seen each other since Return of the Jedi. So I love that. And there's like, I love everything with Luke in this movie. I think he's got a great arc because at the beginning of the movie, yeah, okay, he's pretty much given up. He's depressed that he created a new Jedi Order. I mean, think about the history of these movies here. You have a Jedi Order where there's thousands of Jedi, and then there's one guy who turns against them and kills them all right? And his son is responsible for training a new generation of Jedi, of bringing the Jedi back. And that guy's name is Luke Skywalker. And Luke Skywalker has a nephew who becomes the next Darth Vader and kills all of his students. So, yeah, if I were Luke, I'd be like, I don't want to do this anymore. You know what? I tried. It really sucked. I don't think this is for me. I mean, I think it would take time to recover from that. And honestly, based on what I see in the flashbacks, and yes, there are flashbacks in this movie, doesn't look like he's been on the island for that long. I mean, it looks like Ben Solo, Kylo Ren, looks like he's about the same age in the flashbacks as he is in the main movie. So I don't think Luke has been gone for that long. It seems like it was just a couple of years ago, honestly. I mean, maybe 5 years, I don't know. Maybe less. But I don't think he would rebound from something like that easily. So I have no problem with the fact that he's gotten a little cynical, okay? I don't have a problem with the fact that it wrecked him. Just like, look, a lot of people had a problem with the fact that Han Solo and Princess Leia weren't together anymore in The Force Awakens, and that Han went back to being a smuggler instead of a general. I think that's a reasonable reaction to your son turning to the dark side, and, you know, that kind of strains your family a little bit. So I could imagine that they would go their separate ways and just fall back into old habits, even though they might not be a good thing. So the fact that Luke Skywalker kind of becomes cynical and doesn't want to do this anymore is reasonable to me. I understand that. And he really, really doesn't want it. So it's a very ominous line in the trailer where he says it's time for the Jedi to end. And I thought, oh my God, they're going to get rid of the Jedi. They're going to replace him with something called the Bendu or something like that. Which, you know, you Star Wars nerds know what the Bendu are. But that's not what he meant at all. It's not like he's going to destroy the Jedi Order, or he's turned to the dark side, or that the Jedi are corrupt and evil and they got to be replaced by something new and better. It's actually pretty tame of a revelation, really, when he says it's time for the Jedi to end. What he means is, look, I failed. I don't want to do this anymore. I'm going to die. The Jedi are going to die. Just leave me alone. And that's really what it is. It's the beginning of the movie where he's a grizzled old mentor who needs to be brought in the game by the new young hero. We've seen this story before. It's nothing surprising. And he has an arc. And that's what makes it so acceptable to me, which is that he ends the movie in the most heroic, legendary, mythic fashion possible. And he's the most awesome that he's ever been at the end of this movie. And honestly, I used to say that Return of the Jedi is not my favorite Star Wars movie, but it's my favorite version of Luke Skywalker in Return of the Jedi, okay? It's when he finally gets his stuff together and he's actually a competent hero, and he's mature, and he's grown up, and he's got the skills to survive. So that title has been supplanted by his Last Jedi version of the character, which is he starts out as a mean, grizzled, kind of a jerk mentor, and by the end, he is the most legendary, epic Jedi ever. And I think that's fantastic. I love it. And my favorite scene, I think, is close to the end, the climax of the movie, where he faces off against Kylo Ren. And he's got these great, like, awesome one-liners. And he's just the coolest he's ever been in those scenes. So his last words before he dies are, so he's projecting himself as a force illusion, basically a force illusion to Kylo Ren. Kylo Ren thinks he's fighting the real Luke, but he's not. The real Luke is still on the island meditating and projecting his spirit. And Kylo Ren kind of slices through him with a lightsaber, and Luke's still standing there. And then he stabs Luke with the lightsaber, and there's no one there. But the idea is that this is putting such a strain on the real Luke that he can't take it, and he's going to be dying soon. But Luke's last line in the entire series is "See you around, kid," and he's just so stoic and like awesome about it. I'm saying awesome because I'm trying to censor myself. It's badass, all right? It's a badass moment. It's the most badass Luke's ever been, okay? It's, see you around, kid. And he's got another great line where Kylo Ren is saying something like, "Have you come back to beg my forgiveness and, bring me back to the light side?" And Luke's like, "No." And then they fight each other. And he's like, "I'm done with you, kid. Just leave me alone. Let's get this over with." So, I think by the end of the movie, Luke proves himself to be a true legend, and he elevates himself to mythic status because his illusory form is able to do things that no actual Jedi could do, surviving an onslaught of a whole bunch of guerrilla walkers and stuff like that. So, I think that he really elevated his role by the end of the movie, and I'm totally fine with that arc. It's probably the biggest character arc he gets in the entire series, okay? So the Luke stuff is great, and the Rey stuff is great, and yeah, we learned about Rey's parents, the big revelation, and this movie is almost like an exercise in subverting expectations to the point of anticlimax, okay? So I talk about surprises being overrated a lot, which means that surprises are good if they're better than what you expect, okay? So, for example, we just had Christmas a couple days ago. If you say, "Surprise, I didn't get you anything," that is different from what you expected, but it's not better than what you expected. Better is, "Hey, I got you this thing that you didn't know I was going to get you that you really wanted." And you're like, "Oh, wow, that's amazing. That's a good surprise." A bad surprise is, "Surprise, I got you this thing you really didn't want, and you're probably going to have to give away or return." So that's the difference here. So surprising for the sake of being surprising is not an admirable quality, okay? So sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. In this case, it's almost like they're purposely anticlimactic, and it works in a lot of cases, which is we do find out who Rey's parents are in this movie, and the actual revelation is that they're nobody, that her parents are just junk traders who sold her off for drinking money, okay? So that's the point. The whole point is that she has no place in this universe, that she has no place in this story, and that she's not special. And that's really the kind of twist, is that she's not a Skywalker, she's not a Solo, she's not a Kenobi, she's nobody. And that's the tough thing that she has to accept in order to be something bigger after that, after figuring that out. So the other interesting thing is that they do not kill off Princess Leia in this movie. So they're going to have a heck of a time explaining where she is in episode 9, I got to say that. And I feel bad for J.J. Abrams because like I said, Ryan Johnson basically went through and systematically destroyed everything set up in The Force Awakens, and now JJ's got to come back for episode 9. He's like, oh my god, you ruined everything that I set up in the last one. Now what am I going to do? So, for example, they killed off Snoke kind of early in the movie. Not early in the movie, but well before the climax. It's like the end of Act 2 when they kill Snoke. So that's interesting, because Kylo Ren is the real villain. And he's the one who kills Snoke, which is interesting. But I think that my major problem with this movie is, and it hit me in different waves here. The first thing I realized is that Finn and Rose's story not only feels out of place and a little bit weird in this movie, but in the end, whatever they were doing didn't matter at all. Okay, that's the problem. It's not so much that they fail, which they do fail. What bothers me is that whether they fail or succeed, either way, it has nothing to do with the main plot. They have no impact on the main plot. And here's what I mean by that. The subplot, the main subplot of this movie is that the Resistance is evacuating their base, and they're being pursued by the First Order. Now, the First Order is able to track them through light speed because they have some new kind of tracking system. So Finn and Rose's mission is to disable the tracking device on the lead Star Destroyer that's chasing them. And that's kind of a cool mission, except it's a really convoluted way to do that, because they got to get on the Star Destroyer, but to do that, they need the Master Code Breaker. To do that, they need to get to this a casino planet called Canto Bight, where they find a code breaker, and they bring him back, and they actually don't succeed in disabling the tracker. Doesn't really matter, though, because whether they had succeeded or not, it takes them so long to do it that the Resistance actually reaches their destination by the time they figure all this out. So the whole thing is that the Resistance is going from their old base to their new base on Crate, and that's where they're going the whole time, and that's where the Empire is tracking them the whole time, or that's where the First Order is tracking them the whole time. And it's like, by the time Finn and Rose achieve their goal, it's kind of pointless anyway, because by the time, like, look, even if they had succeeded, okay, the Resistance has already reached their destination, so it's like, yay, we disabled the tracker. Doesn't really matter, because we got where we're going, and the First Order's still here. All right, you took too long. So that was the first thing that occurred to me, that subplot had no value whatsoever to the story. Literally, if you went back to Finn's very first scene where he wakes up in his hospital bed, just show that and then cut right before he wakes up. So you just show him in the hospital bed and then cut to Poe or whatever. You could literally lift all of Finn's scenes out of this movie and not miss a beat. And the only plot hole that would be present is, where's Finn? And you can bring him back for the final battle, because he actually does some cool stuff in the final battle, and he actually helps and matters a little bit. I guess you got to explain why he's there, so you would show him come back. But you could do an entire alternate version of this movie where Finn's just gone for the first 3/4 of the movie, and it would actually run better and make more sense. Because the stuff with Finn and Rose is not that interesting anyway, and it doesn't really feel right. There's a sequence where they're riding these creatures through a city, and it's basically, what they're doing is, it looks like they're riding Harry Potter creatures through the capital of the Hunger Games series, okay? It's very non-Star Warsy. It's a different kind of fantasy. It's not the kind of subplot I wanted at all in this movie, but there's literally a track on the soundtrack called Fun with Finn and Rose. Fun with Finn and Rose. And that's basically their subplot. It's just, hey, crazy kooky adventures with Finn and Rose. It's like a Saturday morning cartoon. Now, I did hear rumors that Lando Calrissian was supposed to be the head of that casino planet that they go to, Canto Bight, and that would have been awesome. If they had Lando Calrissian in that casino, it almost would have made it worth it, but he wasn't in it, so never mind. Now, all of that happens. Okay, so that was the first thing I realized, but then it got even worse because all of that happens because Poe is doing this stuff behind the back of the Admiral, who is, I think it's Admiral Hodor. I hope I'm getting that right, Hodor. So Admiral Hodor has a plan and she won't tell Poe what it is. So Poe goes behind her back and creates a new plan involving this master code breaker and all that stuff, getting onto a Star Destroyer and everything. And eventually, he has a whole mutiny against Admiral Hodor and he takes over the ship. And then Princess Leia stuns him. He wakes up and she's like, "You dummy. Do you realize what she's doing here?" And she explains the plan to him. He's like, "Oh, I didn't get that. I didn't know that you were planning that. My bad." So the thing is, though, if at the very beginning, in the very first scene between Poe and Hodor, instead of her saying, "You don't need to know my plan, you just need to follow orders," if she could have just said, "Well, here's what we're going to do." As the Resistance and the Rebellion tend to do in these situations, they share information. They're not secretive, usually. This was a secret just to create a plethora of subplots. All right? It can't be that big of a secret because they tell them at the end of the movie what their plan is. So rather than just say, "Hey, you know what? You don't need to know this information. I'm your leader. Just follow orders." She could just say, "Yeah, sure. Here, we're going to do this." And he's like, "Oh, that's a really great plan." Boom. All of his stuff and all of Finn's stuff and all of Rose's stuff would be cut from the movie. All right? That's how trivial all of that stuff is. It's 2 or 3 subplots completely predicated on a simple misunderstanding, which is a bummer. All right? That's really my biggest problem with this movie. So I love the Luke stuff. I love everything with Rey and Kylo Ren. But, man, like, if you look at the other subplots, like Finn, Poe, Rose, even Leia, Hodor, all that stuff, it was pretty dumb. And General Hux, all that stuff, it doesn't work. Most of the movie doesn't hold up. It's just the main through line of Luke and Rey. And, Rey going to... Everything from Rey's point of view works great. Okay? And the one scene that Luke and Leia have together is beautiful. It's perfect. It's amazing. It's emotional. It's heartwarming. I love the ending of this movie. I love the climax of this movie. And really the message of the movie is that Luke's not the last Jedi. And that they won't be the last Jedi. That there will be more. All right. And it's got an ultimately hopeful message, but the weaknesses in this movie are so great that I can't ignore the fact that they're completely pointless. Okay. So that's really my only issue with this movie. I think they took Luke to some really interesting places. I think they took Rey to some really interesting places, and Kylo Ren even more developed than he was in the last one. So honestly, the main through line is really solid. Everything else is pretty pointless and kind of stupid. And that's really why I gotta give this one a 3 out of 5. So a lot of the questions in the Force Awakens are still not answered and probably never will be. We don't know where Luke Skywalker's lightsaber comes from. We don't know where Lor San Tekka got a piece of the map to find Luke. We don't know where Snoke came from. We don't know what his backstory is. Guess it doesn't really matter now because he got chopped in half. But it's got some really cool stuff in it. The back-to-back lightsaber fight with Kylo Ren and Rey teaming up against the royal guards that Snoke has. That's great stuff. I think Kylo Ren's going to have to step up his game, though, if he's the real villain of the story, because he was really cool with his mask on in The Force Awakens. He doesn't have his mask on for most of this movie, and it works because he's a sympathetic character, and you're starting to think he's not the villain. But if he really is the villain of the story and Snoke's out of the picture, then he's going to have to step up his game and be really, really awesome in the next one, because I think the next one's going to have to pick up several years later, because they should bring it to the place where Return of the Jedi was, which is you skip to the end of the story, okay? Rey is got to be at the end of her journey. She's got to be the ultimate Jedi. And Kylo Ren has to be at the end of his journey. He's got to be the ultimate Dark Jedi, or Knight of Ren, or whatever he is. They still don't explain the Knights of Ren and where they came from. So most of the questions you have from The Force Awakens don't get answered. But they do explain the destruction of the new Jedi Temple. They explain what happened between Luke and Kylo Ren. They explain who Rey's parents are. The rest is pretty much not addressed, which is a little bit frustrating, but I'll go with it. I guess I don't know if we need answers to these questions. I guess they can answer them in the books or the comic books or the video games or whatever. I hope that these blanks will be filled in someday, not necessarily by the movies, but I'm not necessarily sure that Rian Johnson is the right person to direct an entire trilogy of unrelated Star Wars movies, but maybe if he can up his game in the writing department and not play around with iconic characters, people might be more forgiving. So, that being said, bottom line, 3 out of 5, but well worth seeing for the good stuff, okay? The good moments are worth seeing, and I would definitely go check this movie out if you're a Star Wars fan. If you're not a Star Wars fan, sorry, you're going to be totally lost here. And make sure you watch The Force Awakens before you go see it, because otherwise you're going to be confused. But again, I just spoiled the whole movie for you, so I hope you've seen The Force Awakens, and I hope you've already seen The Last Jedi if you're listening to this, all right? So, that being said, very controversial movie, which means I'm very excited to hear your opinions down in the comment section below, okay? So, did you like this movie? Did you not like this movie? Did you hate their version of Luke, or did you actually go with it, all right? What do you think about all the crazy stuff? And yes, spoilers. There'll be lots of spoilers in the comments below, okay? So, it's not spoiler-free territory down there, so write whatever you want, okay? Let's hear some Star Wars The Last Jedi debates down there, okay? So leave your comments in the section below. This is Good Screenwriting, and I'm Trevor Meyer. See you next time.